Hi, it's Andy Lazarus, and I'm here with Alan Roth. We talk about things that we discussed in our book, A Return to Healing, and we like to talk about some of the issues as how it relates to today's healthcare system. And Alan, you showed me the other day an article about these new weight loss drugs, which everyone is yakking about, which are on all the TV commercials. All the movie stars are using them and losing tons of weight. And also, by the way, last year insurance paid $35 billion for these drugs. It's expected it's going to be closer to 50 billion this year. Um, so maybe they don't work so well in everyone. What do you think?
So, so Andy, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I wasn't surprised when I saw the article in my in basket, but it just goes back to, how drugs are funded, how drugs are made, and the collaboration or inappropriate collaboration between research and pharma and how they're hand in hand and how it's funded. And, we've seen many drugs over the years get released and either get removed or found out to be a dud or whatever it may be. That's my bird yelling in the background. Sorry, guys. But we've seen it so many times. And when a drug gets released, it essentially needs to show that it does what they created it to do, which is, whatever the endpoint may be, a blood sugar level or a blood pressure, and not kill you. But that doesn't mean it's good for you. That doesn't mean it makes you live longer. We could talk about other drugs on this talk, but time and time again, drugs come out. They're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Everybody wants to be on them. And we find out two things. We find out they don't work as good, and we find out they have major side effects. So the study that was just released is it doesn't work as good, and it's making some people go blind, which originally was the boot. So why don't you take over for a minute, Andy, while I try and shut up my bird?
I don't even hear your bird. I have all these birds outside, so they might be silenced, and your bird might be, attached to the pharmaceutical company. So almost anything we say, it's going to get annoyed with us. Look, the idea of research now that it's science is itself debatable because almost all medical research that's clinical, in other words, beyond the lab, is financed by and run by pharmaceutical companies. And for a place like Harvard to get research dollars, they have to suck up to the drug companies. They have to do research the drug companies want to do. They have to do the research in a way the drug companies know will promote their product. Um, and similarly, when these drugs go in front of the FDA, and there are a lot of things written about this, including a book we talked about recently called No More Tears, and our book, we have a lot of statistics about how the FDA is 100% funded by drug companies and does the work of drug companies. So when it goes in front of the FDA has very limited criteria in terms of passage. Like Alan says, it can't kill you today, and it works to fix something. In a cholesterol drug, it might work to lower cholesterol. It might not reduce heart attacks or strokes or anything meaningful. The FDA doesn't care about that. These are called surrogate endpoints, endpoints that have been equated to some outcome. So the weight loss that occurs from these new drugs is a surrogate endpoint. Yes, you lose weight, but do you keep it off? Does it have side effects? Does it improve your health? People assume if you lose weight, your health is better, but we don't know. And these drugs claim to reduce cardiovascular disease, in other words, reduce heart attacks, but they're short-term drugs, and only a couple people did better, and we don't know in the long run whether they'll increase or lower heart attacks. But a lot of my doctor colleagues have told me, oh, these drugs, we at least know they lower heart attacks. Well, again, they end these trials exactly when they want to end them. So if a couple people arbitrarily had fewer heart attacks in the drug group, they're going to end the trial at that moment, and that's what we'll have. Interestingly, too, Alan, you know how a lot of these academic researchers are completely funded by the drug companies. There's one at Harvard who was a huge proponent of these drugs, put everyone on them, was given talks for the drug company, but recently came out with an article saying, "Look, I take back everything I said. Most people cannot stay on these drugs safely. They lose muscle mass. their bowels get paralyzed. And when they come off the drugs, and we could go into the mechanism, but we won't. It's stuff we've written about if you go on our website. But if they come off the drugs, they are actually more ravenously hungry all the time, 24/7 than they were before the drugs, and they gain a tremendous amount of weight. It's not a long-term solution because it destroys muscle, and that's part of the weight loss. And it may paralyze the bowel. And as Alan says, we're finding other things like it causes blindness, which is horrific. So if you stay on the drugs, you might get really sick. If you get off them, you're going to just have super trouble maintaining your weight. And this guy came out and said all that. Did that make the national news? No. Did it make it into medical journals? No. Because again, these places are all financed by pharmaceutical companies, and that's the problem with new drugs and new science.
Yeah, and
You know,
there's
we're
no
just
way to
stuck.
say if any of these benefits are from the drug or the actual weight loss. Okay. And everybody, I have my practice, everybody's looking for a quick fix. Take a shot and lose weight, not necessarily have an excellent diet, not exercise. And like you said, they're losing muscle mass because they're not exercising with the diet. So they're actually getting sicker, physiologically in their body with less weight. And there's no way anyone's going to be able to afford to stay on these medications forever, assuming the prices come down to something, non-astronomical. I just read something that United States has 5% of the world's population, and we pay for like 75% of the world's drug costs, which is another disgrace that we have. But, people are just not staying on it long term. They're dropping off. They're not dealing with the side effects. And like Andy said, they come off the drug and they end up getting bigger than they were before. So we're not putting those patients in the study that are actually getting more harmed by being on the drug of the rapid, severe weight loss, then cutting it down and then going back and eating again and putting the weight back on.
And it's important to know too that diet is crucial to our health. The quality, not just the quantity of food we eat, really defines how healthy we are. It feeds our gut bacteria, it lowers inflammation if we eat the right way. We could have a whole podcast of how to do that. We're two of maybe 0.1% of doctors who know about nutrition because nutrition is not taught in medical school. I got a separate degree in nutrition, and I teach it in my practice. And that is, I hear what other doctors say. They do not understand that we need to eat well. So you go on these drugs, and if it does reduce your appetite, you could still live on potato chips and Twinkies, but you're not going to feed your gut bacteria and you're going to get sicker. Something else that nobody talks about. And think about it, Alan. You work in an impoverished area with food deserts. 35 billion dollars. Just imagine what we could do with that money to improve the nutrition of all Americans
Right.
and how what that would do to health.
And we improve it through nutrition education. A lot of people have negatives about RFK Jr. We know that, but food is killing our nation. Obesity is the number one killer. Obesity is what leads to heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure. And those diseases kill you. And cancer is now being shown more and more. That's why we're seeing 40-year-olds with colon cancer. It's from the McDonald's diet. It's not from cancers growing more vigorously, stronger at earlier ages. It's because of the food we're eating. And you'll see, I guarantee within the next 2 years, we're going to see the recommendation for colon cancer screening come down to 40 because we're seeing 40-year-olds with colon cancer. It's
I
horrendous
just I
what's
just
going.
read an article that it is coming down to 40. So it might be happening even before you realize it.
Yeah,
And yeah,
well,
get
it,
get
it makes sense. We're seeing it. And it's our diet and it's the ultra processed foods that we're eating that are killing people, and everybody's ignoring it because of the lobbies of the food industry. And we've known for years that, as close as you could get to a plant-based diet, the longer you're going to live. I'm not saying everyone should be on a plant-based diet, but we know people who are on healthy plant-based diets lower their incidence of cardiovascular disease and cancer. It's been proven, in many parts of the world where they don't even believe in doctors, but they believe in, exercise, working the land, being with their family, and eating healthy food.
And it, yeah, it comes natural to people outside this country. And yeah, the idea of a plant-based diet, and plant-based does not mean total plant. It means predominantly plant and not, and the plants not being refined. So, sugar and white flour are refined plants. We don't want that. We want whole plants. But yeah, so the drug company industry donates $22 billion a year to the media. I mean, that's just to the media. And only one group donates more, and that's the food industry. But the food industry helps the drug industry by making everyone sick. And believe me, when they reduce colon cancer screening, or they might introduce screening for other things based on how sick we are as a society, they are secretly applauding the food industry. And there's no reason that the medical community wants us to be well. There was an article I read that in one of these throwaway medical journals that said, "Is wellness bad for healthcare?" And their answer was yes. And it was almost like they didn't find this to be ironic. They just said, yeah, we got to be careful. And it is. It's terrible for healthcare if you're healthy. And these drugs that are now being used to just fix weight do not address anything about nutrition at all. It's not even a part of them. They don't talk about exercise. They don't talk about everything that's a true determinant of our health. They just lower weight and do it at a huge cost for a lot of people.
Right. And what Andy just said, two of the procedures that make these big health systems richer and richer and richer is neurointerventional procedures for strokes and cardiac interventional procedures for heart attacks, whether it's stents or angioplasty or bypass surgery. And we know that people wouldn't need all this stuff if they ate healthy. So we reward people for bad behavior by doing all these aggressive testing. And it's the same thing with colon cancer. So eat like crap. And, we'll start doing your colonoscopy at 30. Or, maybe we should do it to teenagers that, have had more than 20,000 Big Macs by the time they're 20 or something like that.
And yeah, and that does reward not only you for getting all these procedures, but it rewards the medical system because that's how that it fuels the payment to the medical system. And so you're not going to see pushback. And yeah, when Kennedy talks about the fact we need fewer pesticides, that we need less ultra processed foods, especially in schools, it's wild to see who pushes back. I get it. Some of the conservatives, even in Trump's administration, are saying, well, we don't want to mess with the farmers. They make their own decision and we don't want to mess with the schools. But the liberals are attacking it. I mean, God knows, why are the liberals attacking the fact that we want a healthier diet and fewer pesticides? It just shows the politicization of healthcare. That some of
Because their lobbies are also being funded by food and pharma.
That's true.
That's
The
why.
amazing thing about food and pharma is they are not politically divisive. They will fund everyone equally. They fund Fox and CNN and MSNBC, the right and the left. Yes, maybe they're the most democratic group in our country because they don't care what political party you're from or what station you are. They will fund you and you will be beholden. And so many stories have been proven to be pulled from the media when drug companies threaten to withdraw advertising, that you don't see anything in the media that talks about this. You never will. And you also are not going to hear Congress people talk about this. And you're not going to hear groups that are considered consumer advocacy groups like the American Cancer Society, American Heart Society, American Diabetes Association. They're not going to talk about it other than give it lip service because they are all funded by pharma. And this this I don't know if the food groups and the pharma groups are in cahoots, but they both actually do well if you are less healthy. That they love it.
And hence you're saying, that good health is bad for our healthcare system because prevention doesn't pay anything for these people. Keeping people well and healthy and out of the emergency room and out of the hospital and out of the intervention suite and out of the OR is bad for big business in a hospital where that's where they make their money. That's why, we have a chapter in our book about, the hospitals being the core of our healthcare system. Shouldn't be the hospitals, it should be the communities where people live and doctors serve them. But instead, you go to the hospital and get all this amazing care, and people think like that's what you need to do because that's where you get healthy. You go to the hospital and you get all kinds of procedures done to you that may kill you, may not help you, like a spine surgery that we talk about. But let's get it done because my back hurts, so let's get some spine surgery and let me hurt more, and then let me go for more epidurals, which have been proven not to work. So we live in a society where healthcare doesn't evolve. It takes us like on an average, I think it's 10 years, Andy, for doctors to change based on evidence that they've actually read. Like the evidence is there. We know what we're doing to people is no good, but we keep doing it for another 10 years.
And don't feel like the CDC or any other group's different. I mean, the CDC was given information by the European Society and a group called Cochrane, which studies things, on a drug called Tamiflu many years ago, which is supposed to be for influenza. All of Europe stopped using it because the studies, the unpublished studies by drug companies that they insist to be released, all showed the drug does not work, and causes major side effects, especially in the elderly, where we use it the most. And the CDC said, well, we choose not to look at that evidence.
And
And they,
especially when you have the flu, it makes you even
yeah,
sicker.
make you sicker, right? It
But
adds. It's
he,
like what Osler said. If you have a disease and you add a medicine, now you have two diseases, and that's what it's doing.
but
So
I think even in their early published studies, I don't remember, they only said you got better like, 6 hours
it
quicker.
was 6 hours, and those are observational studies, and the actual randomized studies that the companies never published showed no improvement. Not even you don't even get the 6 hours, but you get sick to your stomach and throw up. Last thing you need when you can't eat anyway, right, is now you're getting dehydrated. But the CDC has not backed off, and at least where I live, I take care of people in long-term care. We are forced to use Tamiflu when even one or two people have flu, and that comes from the CDC. So yeah, don't
And
don't trust them. I mean, they're
And it's the exact same thing with Paxlovid. We
same
know it's
thing.
we know it's not a good drug. It's not good for elderly. It's not good if you have kidney problems. It has major side effects, and there's no real evidence that it does anything. But there is real evidence. They started in the beginning, 2% rebound COVID, and it went to 5% and 25%. And then every political figure, and especially Andy's best friend Fauci, got rebound COVID. He was probably cheering it on.
Biden did too, by the way. They both got rebound COVID, and they still said it's a great drug. It does reality does not affect this strong allegiance we have to fixing everything with drugs and spending $35 billion on drugs for weight loss and ignoring nutrition should sound absolutely bizarre to anyone, because if we had a nutrition program that was viable in this country and we ended all food deserts, it would probably cost less than $1 billion to do all of that. And we're willing to not do any of that and spend the 35 because that money goes into the pockets of people that pay everyone. So it's really beware of the quick fixes in medicine, because just understand these drugs are poorly studied, that what you hear from doctors, from big agencies, is impacted by their allegiance to drug companies and by the drug company data that comes out. And, when reality hits and these drugs turn to be disasters, because remember, Alan, the opioid crisis started through a couple pharmaceutical companies, but they all said it was safe, and everyone believed it. Just, oh, they say it's safe. That's good. Here's a study. It's safe. Let's go up to 120 milligrams of OxyContin. That's
Yeah.
safe. You won't get addicted. So yeah, don't believe it, and it's really sad to see that so many people are on these drugs. And I guess, Alan, we're going to have a lot of work in the
Yeah.
future when they get off the drugs, and we have to deal with the consequences because that's the
Absolutely.
problem.
Because we haven't addressed the cause of the disease,
We
which
have
is what we
not.
eat and exercise.
We're putting a Band-Aid on an abscess and saying cure. And the abscess keeps growing. So, okay, we will end here. And we got a lot more to talk about. So we'll see everyone next
See
week.
you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.